Have you ever wondered why there are stoplights on 71 Highway, or why skyscrapers seem to be segmented in one part of the city? As citizens of Kansas City, we often wonder why many parts of our city look the way they do, and who makes these decisions. Today, I'd like to persuade you to understand that urban planning is somewhat of a silent but integral part of the way cities work. As both a student of urban planning as well as an active citizen of a planned city, I have come across several arguments for and against planning. Today I'd like to explain some issues facing our cities. Then I'll expand on how these problems have emerged and why they're important. Finally, I'd like to give you a better understanding of what exactly urban planning is and why it is both beneficial and necessary to fixing these problems and improving quality of life. I'd like to start with some context and discuss some of the major problems cities are encountering today. There are two main problems that modern-day cities face, namely urban decay, when parts of the city become run-down and undesirable to live in, and transportation issues, problems with getting masses of people from point A to point B. Urban decay, also known as blight, is the process whereby a previously functioning city or part of a city falls into disrepair and decrepitude, according to the American Planning Association. Urban decay is a comprehensive problem because it actually creates more problems in a city once it begins. Um, when cities fall into decay, they experience population flights to the suburbs, leaving the city hollowed out in some parts and thus susceptible to criminal activity. Property values decrease, thus decreasing the tax revenue the city would use to improve that spot. Another comprehensive urban issue is that of transportation. Cities like ours, Kansas City, that are relatively new as compared to New York or other early cities, have been more or less designed for cars since the founding. The problem with this is that a city centered around the automobile tends to sprawl, meaning destinations become further and further apart. This creates an isolation issue for those that don't have a car. How do they get to centers of employment? How do they access fresh food or education? As you can see, the nature of the way our society is developed has created some interesting problems that threaten the quality of life of urban dwellers. According to the United States Census, over half of the population lives in urban areas, and that number is projected to increase steadily over the next 30 years. These problems will not fix themselves, so the need for planning solutions is dire. To understand how planners can fix these problems, we should start with how these issues came to be. From the late 18th to early 19th century, mostly provoked by World War II, rural people moved from the country to the city for employment in the industrial sector, thus causing the golden age of early American cities. Industries related to the war, such as ammunition plants, airplane assembly plants, and other suppliers were setting up headquarters in city cores and employing thousands of eager workers. The increasing population of workers and their families eventually led to property demand skyrocketing and residential buildings popping up on nearly every block. Changes came eventually, though, especially in transportation funding and resources. The private car eliminated some of the city's advantages in transportation. Citizens were no longer limited by the routes of subways and trains. The end of World War II brought the demise of the industrial boom, and many were left unemployed and without a reason to live in the city. Then came an even bigger blow, when many political decisions favored suburban development and encouraged suburbanization. City taxes were drawn from the urban areas to build new infrastructure for remote, racially restricted suburban towns. This was the context of racial discrimination exercised as white flight, or the abandonment of U.S. cities by the white, middle, and upper class. When it seemed the cities of Americas couldn't take much more, they were drained further through the building of the interstate highway system. Strip malls, suburban retail, and employment centers further discouraged citizens from traveling into the city to shop, eat, or work. Because of this, almost 95% of cities with populations greater than 100,000 lost population in the 1970s. Abrupt population decline in city cores left merchants without businesses, schools without students, neighborhoods without inhabitants, and so on. Buildings, schools, and houses were vacated, left to be boarded up, or in most cases to deteriorate. Gangs and other violence plagued these decrepit neighborhoods, and without police intervention, cities became dangerous places. Now enter the age of modern urban planning. as an answer to these problems. So whenever I tell someone I study urban planning, I typically get a quizzical, scrunched face response. What is urban planning? They say. Planning, according to James G. Koch, is a dynamic profession that works to improve the welfare of people and their communities by creating more convenient, equitable, healthful, efficient, and attractive places for present and future generations. So now you're thinking, so what does an urban planner actually do? Planners research, design, and develop programs. They lead public meetings. They affect social change, perform technical analyses, manage, and educate, above all else. Some planners will focus on just one of these roles, such as transportation planning, but most will work at many kinds of planning throughout their careers. The basic element is the creation of a plan, an actual document. Plans are developed through analysis of data and identification of goals for the community or the project. These plans are typically adopted by municipalities so that they actually become law. Once a plan is created and adopted, it must be followed, ensuring that the progress and fate of the community is not thrown away